This just changed everything. Yesterday, the Houthis entered the war. They launched a ballistic missile and a rocket from Yemen toward Israel. Both were intercepted. No damage, no casualties. So, at first glance, nothing happened. But that's not the real story, because what matters here is not the missiles, it's what this move unlocks, and it could hit something far more fragile than a military target: global trade. To understand why this matters, you need to look at what happened just days ago. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. Before the conflict, around 15 million barrels of oil were moving through that narrow corridor every single day. 15 million. Now imagine trying to replace that overnight. You can't, not fully, but Saudi Arabia found a workaround. They started moving oil across their own territory, from the eastern coast to the west, then loading it onto tankers in the Red Sea, and from there shipping it toward Asia, a detour, but a necessary one, because around 80% of that oil was going to Asia anyway. So instead of Hormuz, the system rerouted, and everything started flowing through a new bottleneck, Bab el Mandeb. And that's where the problem begins, because that narrow passage is exactly where the Houthis operate. You've seen this before. Last year, they targeted commercial ships in that area. Their goal was political pressure, but the effect was global. Shipping slowed down, insurance costs exploded. Major companies started rerouting vessels around Africa, adding 2 weeks to delivery times, 14 extra days, and billions in additional costs. Now imagine that scenario again, but worse, because this time it's not just container ships, it's oil. A significant portion of Saudi oil is now passing through that exact same route. So if the Houthis decide to act, you don't just disrupt trade, you disrupt energy. And when energy is disrupted, everything reacts: prices, supply chains, inflation. But here's where things get more complicated, because this might not be a full entry into the war. Not yet. The Houthis released a statement outlining a three-phase strategy. Phase 1: continued attacks on Israeli military targets. Pressure, controlled escalation. Phase 2: a naval blockade, specifically targeting ships linked to Israel in Bab el Mandeb. And that matters more than people think, because a huge portion of Israeli trade flows through that route. And then comes Phase 3, the dangerous one: direct attacks on US military bases. If the United States becomes more deeply involved, that's the line. That's where this stops being contained and starts becoming regional. But here's the interesting part. Despite all this, the Houthis are still holding back. And that tells you something. They remember what happened last time, when the US responded: airstrikes, daily pressure, infrastructure hit, leadership under threat. They felt it. So now they're playing a different game: calculated signals, measured escalation. The missile launch wasn't random, it was a message, a warning. We're here and we can do more, but they're not fully committing, not yet. And that hesitation matters, because it suggests something else is happening behind the scenes. Iran. For years, Iran supported the Houthis: weapons, training, funding, part of what's often called the axis of resistance. But now, Iran is under pressure: multiple fronts, economic strain, internal instability, and that changes the dynamic, because instead of just supporting, Iran now needs support. And there are increasing signs that Tehran is pushing its proxies to escalate, to widen the battlefield, to relieve pressure. But the Houthis are not rushing into it. They're calculating, waiting, choosing their moment. And while that's happening, something else just occurred. Something significant. Israel carried out strikes unlike anything seen so far in this conflict. According to Iranian officials, major industrial infrastructure was hit: steel plants, strategic facilities, key economic nodes. Now, not every detail is fully confirmed. Some reports suggest energy infrastructure was indirectly affected rather than directly targeted. But even that is enough, because industrial capacity is not just economic, it's strategic. Steel production supports military output, repairs, logistics, sustainment, and Iran relies heavily on it. Last year alone, steel exports generated billions, so damaging that sector is not just symbolic, It's pressure, internal pressure, because Iran was already struggling. Sanctions, inflation, public unrest, and now war damage on top of that. And this is where the response begins to expand. Iran is no longer focusing on one front, it's spreading pressure across the region. Attacks have been reported against targets in Gulf countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, others, and here's the key point: some of these countries are not directly involved in the conflict, yet they're being hit, which raises a critical question: why? The answer is simple: expand the cost. If more countries feel the impact, more actors push for resolution. That's the logic. But it comes with risk because it pulls more players into the equation. Take the UAE. A major aluminum plant was reportedly damaged, one of the largest in the region. That's not just infrastructure, that's global supply. Or Saudi Arabia. A military base recently opened to US operations, previously not directly involved. Now it is. Because shortly after it was struck, reports indicate US personnel were injured. Satellite imagery suggests damage to equipment, possibly aircraft, and that changes everything. Because once American assets are hit, the threshold shifts. This is no longer indirect. This becomes direct exposure, and that increases the probability of escalation. Fast. So now step back. Look at the bigger picture. Hormuz is disrupted. Oil is rerouted. Bab el Mandeb becomes critical. The Houthis are present. Iran is under pressure. Israel is striking deeper. The Gulf is being pulled in, and the US is already involved. This is no longer a single conflict. This is a system under stress. Multiple pressure points, all connected. And the question now is not whether things escalate, it's how far. Because if the Houthis fully enter the war, the Red Sea becomes unstable, shipping becomes dangerous, energy flows slow down, and the impact spreads globally, not just in the Middle East, everywhere. Markets react, costs rise, supply chains break, and suddenly, what started as a regional conflict becomes something much bigger. Right now, diplomacy is still active, talks are happening, messages are being exchanged. But at the same time, missiles are being launched, bases are being hit, and lines are being tested. The next few days are critical because this situation is no longer stable, it's balancing, and all it takes is one decision to tip it.